Welcome to the Data Leadership Lessons Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony J. Algman. Data is everywhere in our businesses, and it takes leadership to make the most of it. We bring you the people, stories, and lessons to help you become a data leader. We've partnered with Dataversity to provide listeners with 20% off your first training center purchase with promo code ALGMANDL. Go to dataleadershiptraining.com to learn more. Today on episode 74, we welcome Dave Combs. Dave is a songwriter, entrepreneur, successful business executive, and Amazon best-selling author. Over the past 4 decades, he has written over 120 songs and created 15 albums of soothing, relaxing, instrumental piano music, including the popular standard Rachel's Song. As an entrepreneur growing his Combs music business, Dave uses data analytics to improve customer prospecting and connect his work to people who will benefit from it most. Dave, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Anthony. I'm excited to be here. We're going to have a great time.
Absolutely. We are excited to have you. So why don't we start like we do with all of our guests and just give us a little bit of that story of your career, of where you started and kind of how you found music and how it led to business and writing. I mean, this is quite a journey. So give us the high level view, and we'll kind of take it from there.
Well, let me start even further back than my music story. Let's go back to when I graduated from college in 1969. Now, some of your audience will probably appreciate the fact that I learned to program a computer on an IBM 1620, which was as big as a desk and had 32K of memory. We used punch cards. The output device was a 10 character per second IBM typewriter. That was the output. And so that was the beginning of my life with programming and data. My career started out after college. I went to work for a company called Western Electric, which later it was part of the Bell system and later became AT&T. So I did computer programming. I programmed billing systems, employee account systems, everything. And I programmed in something today's programmers thinks antique language, but it was COBOL, C-O-B-O-L.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It was a great language, and I loved programming in it, and I was very successful at it and enjoyed it tremendously. And so I worked in AT&T, Western Electric, for 22 and a half years. I finally left the company in 1992, but in that interim time period, I got my MBA from Wake Forest University. I was like most you and other folks like yourselves, you got to go back and get your MBA so you're really prepared for today's rapidly changing business environment. I love analytics. I'm a very analytical person, so I love business and learning how to organize and manage and analyze businesses. And so I worked in the Western Electric environment for many years, including managing a factory. I had over 1,000 people working for me on a factory floor at one time, all 3 shifts. We could talk for days on the stories that went on on the factory. But while I was doing that, I was a musician all my life. I grew up in a family of musicians. My mother and father both played the piano. My grandmother Combs played the old pump organ and the auto harp. And I'm from Tennessee. Now, Anthony, if you know anybody from Tennessee, I think it's a state law that you have to be able to play an instrument if you live in Tennessee.
I think you're right, yeah.
So I grew up around music, and of course I worked at AT&T Western Electric during the day, but in the evenings, music was one of my favorite hobbies, and on weekends and so forth. So by 1981, I was working at home one evening, or actually came home from work and relaxing at home. And my way of relaxing is to sit down at the piano and just play something. Now, since this is a show that probably has an audience of a lot of technical folks, I noticed that in my career around technical people, there's a really close correlation between technology and technical people, engineers and that kind of thing, and music. I'd go to classes and these places where we'd be studying, and they'd have a piano over there, and there'd be some PhD Bell Labs engineer sitting over there playing the piano. So I think there's a really high correlation between technology and technical things and music. So music was always a big part of my life, and starting in 1981, when I wrote the first song called Rachel's Song, that was the beginning of the transition of my career from fully technical and business management side to thinking about how could I make a living doing something on my own with my own creativity. So we'll get into the stories of how it evolved, but basically I started with one song, wrote over 120 songs eventually, 15 albums of music, sold my music all over the country and now all over the world through the internet. So my career has started out on the technical side, and I used that technical experience and proclivity to grow my music business and then basically evolve it into a very highly technical and digital world of the current music world.
You know, I love music, and I think that you're onto something with this correlation between, you know, data folks, technical folks, and musicians, or at least, you know, there seems to be a lot of that percolates. I've definitely seen it as well. Do you feel like in music you're using that technical brain directly? Like, do you approach problems or create music using any kind of parallel to what you would do when you were working in a technical environment?
Well, you know, music is a combination of tones, which all have frequencies, which are all very mathematical, and their relationships mathematical as well. And I've always been intrigued by what makes a hit song. You know, how come, and you've probably experienced this too, first time you ever heard one of your favorite songs that eventually became a big hit, first time you ever heard it, you probably said to yourself, I like that, that's going to be a hit. Well, I had that same kind of phenomenon several times, and I've always been intrigued by what makes one song be a big hit and another one not so popular. And a lot of it falls back, I think, upon the physics and the psychological relationship between the tones and your body's hearing and the brain processing sound and all of that. So I think there is some, if you really dove into it scientifically, you could probably find some scientific relationship that you could really study about how music affects the human body and why you like one song versus another. And so but in writing songs, I have to say I don't really think about analyzing, except that I look at structure. Excuse me. I write songs that have a lot of verse, chorus kind of structure, and a musician would, you know, they'll say, well, there's a 4-bar intro to this song. Well, there's 4 measures of introduction. Well, those kind of thinking about, well, a song is maybe, you know, a verse of a song may be 8 bars long or 16. There's some even numbers usually in a song. So there is some mathematical or physical or technical structure to a song. And I make sure, I think if you listen to most of my songs, they are structured in some way to fit some kind of a pattern of a verse and a chorus and that kind of thing. But to really sit down and say, I don't really try to analyze and calculate or plan in terms of any kind of a technical way of the song itself. I kind of let sitting at the piano, I sit at the piano to write my music, and I call it having a conversation with the piano, just me and the keyboard, and I'm playing and I'm listening to what the sounds sound like and say, well, that sounds like I need to go here and that. And you just let the creativity flow. So it's not so much it's not a conscious effort to create. It's almost a subconscious effort.
That resonates with me a lot, and I think the structure is a good word to talk about how those are comparable. I also recall, like, when I was doing a lot of programming, you know, everybody had those days where you were programming where you're trying to solve a particular thing and you're just beating your head against the wall trying to find the right answer. I don't think that feels as much like the music creation as those rare moments where, like you mentioned, flow. There were times when I was programming where I saw the problem and I knew exactly what needed to happen, and it felt like the answers were just flowing through my fingers on the keyboard. It almost felt like I was playing an instrument, like I was playing a piano or something like that, because I was just so connected to the answer, to the creation that I was trying to do. But that's where it's that artistic side of where we are technologists, where that problem solving, the literal breakdown of challenges, that's one side of your brain, and then the other side is where you're doing this creation, where you're creating new functionality, there's got to be some parallels in the way the brain works through some of those items. So that's interesting to think about. Certainly the first time we've talked about that on this show in 74 episodes. So one thing that I have to imagine the people out there are thinking about, they're saying, well, and because I'm weird because what we are doing here, what we're talking about data, when we're thinking about leadership challenges, we're talking about careers and stuff, like this is what I love. This is what I love to do. But I think there's probably a lot of people out there that might find themselves in a similar situation or a parallel to your situation of, hey, I'm doing technology work, maybe like it, find it interesting, but the love, the passion sits somewhere else. And then how did you, while you had the career time where you're doing this in the evenings and the weekends and you're doing it out of the love, but probably for some amount of that time you weren't fully considering it being another chapter in your career, how did you pivot there? How did you find that transition point to say, from saying this is a hobby to this is what I do now? What was that like?
Well, it's and I like to describe your life in terms of you go through life with several different kinds of moments. You have defining moments where something happens and alters the course of your life, but you have no control over it, like a 9/11 or some external force that happens. That's a defining moment. And then there are threshold moments where you have a decision to make. You come up to an intersection and you say, well, do I go left or right, or do I just stay where I am? And that's true in business, and even in in programming or whatever. You got to decide, which way am I going to go with this solution of my problem? And so those are threshold moments. And then there are those what I call aha moments. Those are those where the light bulb comes on and you say, now I get it. Yes, you just get a fist pump. I've got it now. So one of those aha moments came to me when my music, which I always loved, and I had written my first song, Rachel's Song, and I knew everybody loved it. It was named after our goddaughter, and I played it a lot personally for people. And then on one of my business trips to implement a computer manufacturing software system, at an MRP kind of system at a factory in Nashville, Tennessee, I went and got a recording made of Rachel's Song as a demo. And the demo recording was made by a young man by the name of Gary Prim, a studio musician that I met. And the result of what he created for me was so far above any expectation I had. It was one of those aha moments, it just wowed me. When I gave him a piece of paper with a few notes on it, and what I walk out of the studio with is as good a sounding song as I ever heard on the radio. I mean, it's just so above any expectation. So that to me was the point where you'll laugh at this. I was on my way back to the hotel from the recording studio, and I was playing Rachel's Song over and over and over, and I played it so many times that I actually missed my exit in Nashville and circled the town about twice before I even realized that I was lost. And but I kept saying to myself when I heard the music, this is it. I don't know whether you've ever had that occur to you or not, but when you, maybe you did. Let's say you I don't know whether you're married or not, but let's say you met the bride, the person you're going to marry, and you walk away and say, man, she is it. That's the one. Well, I was saying that about my music in that car. The music was playing, and I just said, this is it. Now, I had no clue what it was. I just knew that this was going to be important. And I guess that's when the ball started rolling with, could I possibly turn this into an enterprise where I could do my music full time? And that became revealed to me as I exposed it to people. I got it played on the radio. The response from the radio listeners was just overwhelming. And so that was affirming that I really had something. And I wrote an article in Guidepost magazine about my music, and it went out to 3 million people, and I heard from over 10,000 people in nothing flat, like 2 weeks, about my music. My mail came in a big canvas bag that I couldn't even pick up, and it was amazing. So that was the evolution of my thinking about my music evolved as I saw its receptivity. It's like if you came up with a new product, whether it's a physical gadget or a product, any kind of product, and you find that people love that product. And then all you've got to think about is, well, now how could I mass manufacture this product, and how could I market it? And that's the beginnings of a new business. And I felt the same way about my music, that I had a new product. It was a new song. Everybody loved it. And all I had to do was figure out how to get people to hear it and want to buy it. And so that was my evolution from still doing my job at Western Electric AT&T. But in the evenings and on weekends, my thoughts began to go over to my music business. I wanted to grow my music business, which I was able to do, and quit my job in 1992 and say goodbye to the corporate world of AT&T and hello entrepreneurship and all the things that go along with that from that point forward.
That's amazing. And there's so many things that are relatable in your story of that kind of transition and realizing that, hey, you have this opportunity and you nurture it and you expand on it and you find some success, and then you figure out how can I lean into this and expand that success and ultimately turn it into a business and what have you. I think it's a good lesson, I think, to understanding, sometimes when you do something well and you know that this is a thing that you're uniquely good at, how do you amplify that more versus how, instead of spending all of your time doing the things that you're not good at, there's times where you just need to amplify what you truly are good at. And sometimes we forget that. Sometimes we're like, oh, well, I got to go learn this other thing because I want to be more well-rounded, or it's a part of my job or whatever. But sometimes you gotta find what is it that is you and that you can uniquely do well to add value for whomever is going to experience whatever that is. And that, I think, is eminently relatable in the business world as well as in the more artistic sense.
Yes, and fortunately I was able to use my background in business and my training in math. I'm a math major, physics minor, so I'm a scientist by mathematics, and I was able to use those skills in helping me grow my business. One of the challenges that I had early on, as I had my first album, Rachel's Song, I'd written other songs and produced a CD, and the CD, it looks like this, and it has my first songs that I ever wrote on it. Well, the issue is, well, now that I have a CD, how do I sell it? How do I get it out to the masses? And there are people that are already selling music, and back then we had record stores, stores that only sold records. Well, we don't have much of those anymore, but back then we did. But those people would not carry my music. They didn't ever heard of me. I was a nobody, and they were only interested in the big names. So that was a little discouraging, but it didn't stop me. I knew that I just had to find another way to reach my audience of people that I knew loved my music. I mean, they heard it on the radio. They wrote me letters by the thousands. So I decided that there's got to be another way. And that other way happened to not be one that I had even thought of myself. It happened quite by accident, or maybe it wasn't an accident, but I call those God winks, where the good Lord's taking care of me when I'm not taking care of myself. But anyway, a friend of mine that I was working with at AT&T, she had a friend of hers who owned a gift shop. And she says, Dave, can I give one of your CDs to my friend Jane that owns this gift shop down in Old Town, Alexandria, Virginia? Now, if you've ever been there, you know that's a wonderful tourist town. It's a great place to just wander around in shops and places to eat. And so she gave a CD of Rachel's Song to her friend Jane. Jane played it in her shop. The name of the shop was called America. She played and sold Americana, kind of the patriotic stuff, flags and anything red, white, and blue. And so she put Rachel's Song in her 5 CD changer. And so when John Philip Sousa would finish playing, here comes Dave Combs and his Rachel's Song music. It was quite a contrast when you contrast big pompous music to my soothing, relaxing music. And what happened was everyone in the shop would stop and go over to her counter and say, Jane, what's that music you're playing? I'd like to take that home with me. Well, the next thing I know, I get a phone call from Jane that says, Dave, I'm Jane that owns this America store, and everybody wants to buy your music. Would you sell me some at wholesale? I said, well, sure. So we reached an agreement and everything, and that evening I boxed up a box of cassette tapes and CDs at the time, and Linda and I we were living in Maryland at the time, so we jumped in the car and we drove down to Old Town Alexandria and took her a box of music. Well, that was the first wholesale sale of my music, and I had no idea what was going to happen. 3 or 4 days later, I get another phone call from Jane, and she says, Dave, those are all gone. How about let's double that order and bring me some more quick? So Linda and I made that trip down to Old Town Alexandria every week for a year and a half. And she sold thousands and thousands of tapes of just that one album. And so that was the time when my analytical thoughts kicked in. I created myself a spreadsheet. Even before Excel even existed, we still had a computer, something called a spreadsheet. And so I made me a spreadsheet with Jane's business model on it. I said, okay, here's how many tapes and CDs she's sold. Here's how much I sold them to her for. Here's how much they cost me. And here's my gross profit at the bottom of how much, per week or per month or whatever time frame you want to look at it. And, well, that's a pretty interesting number. And I thought, and then's when Linda and I got to thinking, and I said, well, what if we had just one gift shop per state, like Jane's? Okay, well, I made me another column in my spreadsheet with column 1 times 50. So 50 times column 1. Well, the bottom line number was a much more interesting number, as you can imagine. And so I said, well, this is looking good. And I said, well, what if we just had 5 in each state? Let's do 250. That's really shooting for the moon here. There's 250 in the third column. And you add them all up and look at the bottom number, and I said, Linda, come here, look at this. This bottom line, that's twice what I make at work. So then's when the light bulb really came on, and the idea said, I have got to multiply and duplicate what I've got going with this one gift shop. And so that was the analytical side of me kicking in and deciding that this is the model that I need to replicate. And that's really kind of an entrepreneurial business principle that I really preach to a lot to anybody thinking about a business. You find a business model on a small scale that works. Don't throw your whole life savings into something when you don't know when something's going to work or not. But you find you a model and you test it out and you make sure it works. And once you know that it works, then you go like gangbusters and find every way you can in the world to replicate what you just did on a small scale. And that's a business principle that'll get you a long way.
I think that's an incredible bit of advice, and it immediately got me thinking, because I have a background in consulting, and I have a lot of consultants and entrepreneurs on the show, but I think about, like, it's such a benefit when you have a product that can be replicated and distributed. And so I have 2 questions for you. One is, like, is there a parallel in the services industry of doing kind of what you did on the music side, where we were selling CDs and tapes at these gift stores, and seeing that expansion plan kind of coalesce and drive some real growth? Can you do that when what you're selling is people's time? How does that work? Because that seems like it breaks down. And then the other thing is can that model in music work anymore with how everything has changed to all these streaming services or whatever? Is that a business model that has been broken, and that there is not going to be a Dave Combs potential in today's generation because of the way the music industry has changed?
Well, let me answer your second question first. Yes, indeed, the music business has tremendously evolved and changed from what it was with the sale of physical CDs and cassette tapes back in the 80s and early part of the 90s. And then the latter part of the 90s, the world went basically digital. You may recall Napster came out and was basically selling the digital copies of music for free. You could download music on the internet for free, which was illegal, and they did get punished for it. They got sued, and fortunately that got stopped. But in the process of that, it really absolutely killed the music industry, the sales of music, because if you can ask any musician that was living through the early 90s, the mid 90s, and late 90s, what Napster did to them was it just took a nosedive. And it never really did recover from that in terms of the physical sales, because the whole world then evolved very quickly into a digital medium. And so fortunately, iTunes came along with Apple, and they started selling a song for 99 cents to download. Well, that kind of revived the music business for the most part. It still was a very low number in terms of, when you're used to selling an album for $15, all of a sudden you just get 99 cents for one song, and you don't, the artist and the songwriter, they don't get the full 99 cents either. So it's a very small, your margins suddenly just almost disappeared. But the world evolved from that to streaming and downloading, mostly streaming now. When you want to hear music, you just stream it through a Pandora or a Spotify or iHeartRadio, any of those streaming facilities. But yes, if I had to start over today and try to do what I did in the 90s to build my business from one album to 15 and make a living at it, I don't know. I won't say I couldn't do it, but it would be a much, much, much tougher challenge to accomplish that, because I literally sold hundreds of thousands of albums, of physical CDs and tapes over those years. And now now my music is downloaded and streamed. It's streamed millions of times. I get reports every month from Spotify and all these places how much it's streamed. It's streamed millions of times. But you know how much I get per stream on a song? 0.2 pennies. $0.002 per stream. Now, that's not a lot of money. You have to have a ton of streaming to make any kind of living out of that. Now, people that have the streams in the tens of millions or whatever, yeah, they make a pretty good living at it. But that's not most people. But and your other question was what?
Well, it was around the services industry or anything based on people.
The translation.
Because I have a third question in the wings that ties those together. But
okay.
What do you think about those services businesses?
Well, I think the principle that I'm talking about of replication, small business model and replication, does apply to the service industry, because, yes, you may not be able to replicate yourself physically, like if you're a consultant and you go and physically consult with somebody, but you certainly can replicate yourself these days with video, with post YouTube training sessions. A lot of people make a very good living creating marketing courses, consulting courses and very detailed, and they can basically duplicate themselves through YouTube or whatever video medium that they can use to charge for their services. So it does apply, but it's a little bit different sell. You still have to find ways to reach your customers and have them be willing to pay you a certain fee for attending your course or taking your course or hiring you to come speak virtually at a keynote address or whatever. But so there are parallels, but it's a bit more of a challenge, I think, today, and it's certainly a crowded. It's like music. There's just probably 100 times more music today than there was back in the 80s and 90s. And likewise with podcasts and video and consulting, there's all kinds of competition. So it's a very crowded marketplace.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And there's certainly lower barriers to entry on anything that's content creation oriented. And I think the consulting side of where you're individually working and helping to problem solve and troubleshoot with business and executives and what have you, there's going to be a place for that. And where I see it getting interesting is that perhaps the music industry is moving a bit more towards like the service consulting industry, where like, is the music industry becoming more performance oriented, where you may not be able to sell the music as effectively and piece by piece the way we once did, but is there an increased demand due to the exposure of millions of downloads, for example, of your music? Is there demand for like seeing the music performed live? Is that dynamic changing in the market, or is that just a separate business model entirely? whereas they're evolving somewhat independently, as opposed to like I'm trying to mash them together to think about the role of a consultant as it parallels the role of a musician. I'm trying to figure out whether or not even these parallels make sense or are working, but there's something to it, right?
There is, and when you talk about the music business, there is a big old, almost a Bible book of a handbook about the music business, and the title of the book is "The Businesses," plural, of music. And I think that, if you think about it, there is not just one music business. Yes, there is a whole aspect of the music business where you're talking about performers. You know, these performing artists. Now, I'm a songwriter. I'm not a performing artist. I write the songs and I turn them over to Gary Prim to arrange and record for me. And then we sell the recordings. But there are people, recording artists, these wonderful, you know, like Dolly Parton and Randy Travis in the day, and Alan Jackson, you know, Michael Jackson, all of those performing artists, they created, I guess, the demand for their product through their performances, and that's still a very much a great business model if you are a talented performer and have the built, and usually have some backing to help, you know, fund your concerts and that kind of thing. So yes, you can still make a good living at that, but there are far fewer of those than there are the masses of people who are what I would call the struggling musicians trying to just make a living and playing in their local clubs or whatever. So that there is that aspect is really, it's kind of bifurcated. There's the performing side, that's the big famous and the big people, famous people. And then there's the rest of us that are either performing and trying to do it, and then there's the songwriting, the music creation side of things, people who write music. And Nashville is full of those wonderful folks. The songwriters almost always want to move to Nashville because that's where it's all happening, and they can have chance to pitch their product then to the big name performers that would take their song and make it a big hit. But yeah, there's if you analyze the music business, there are lots of little. You can carve it into different kinds of music business, whether it's the performing or the physical product or the streaming, the downloads, how you advertise or market it. It's a pretty complicated business model, and likewise on the service side, you know, it can be pretty complicated as well. Some people have made a very good living creating a brand for themselves that they can then put their courses together with them basically teaching their subject matter, and they probably have written books to go along with it, so they have a book to sell as well as a course, and then they probably command a pretty good fee to do a speaking engagement on their subject. So there's that's kind of a parallel to it, I believe.
Yeah, that definitely resonates, and I just think about, like, I've been able to visit Nashville a few times, and Memphis I spent a lot of time, and it's just, I love music in the small venues, in the bars, with the people that are so talented. You're like, they should be playing stadiums, and they've written their own songs, and you just see so many people that don't get that big break to become that famous person, but are so immensely talented at what they do, and they do it because they love it, and that's who they are and what they do, and then, you know, they find their way through that career, and that's you know, certainly relatable. But there's something that I just, given that the analytics surrounding that career path is one that is not necessarily you know, looked on as going into music is a good path to great life success under most circumstances, generally not the way people think. I have a deeper appreciation for people who do what they do out of love versus doing what they do out of dollars. And that's kind of true across the board, but I think you see that passion so pronounced in the way people do their work in that space.
Exactly.
So as we see how things have evolved in music, and how they've evolved on the business side of music, which is to have that kind of career in music, in any of these roles, really, you have to start to understand some of the dynamics of the business behind it and some of the data and some of the opportunities there, because under the best circumstances, you're likely to struggle. Do you have any other things that you have encountered along this journey around data, around managing a business, around being an entrepreneur, even around like the book that you wrote tied back to some of this? How have you kind of pieced that together in more recent years to continue to expand that business that you've created?
Well, a lot of it has had to do with how do you use today's technology platforms to sell your product, whether it's a musical product or a book or a course or whatever it is that you're selling that can be distributed electronically through the internet. And of course, the publishing business has totally turned it on its head. You used to, when you wrote a book, you'd get a publisher and we have to print 15,000 books minimum or something. So a lot of these authors would end up with a garage full of boxes of their old book that never sold. But today's technology, when somebody wants to go on Amazon and look up my book, if they order one book, they print one book. It's print on demand. There is no more inventory of books. And that business model has completely changed. So that has basically lowered the barrier of entry into writing a book to almost zero. I mean, anybody can put together on a word processor a Word document and create a PDF of a book, design your cover, and upload it to Amazon, and whammo, you've got yourself a book. Now, it's not quite exactly that simple, but that's technologically wise it is, and so people can upload, and become published authors without any barrier to entry, any friction. And the same with music. I can create on my laptop computer here. I have a garage band studio that's got more tracks and channels than the big multi-million-dollar studios used to have. And so you can create your product today at home in your home studio as easily as you could years ago in a big studio. And you can also publish it on the internet as easy. But that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to necessarily make a living at it, because you and a few million of your closest friends are doing the same thing. And so you have to find ways to distinguish yourself. And so then you get into the issue of how do I generate some publicity and marketing and awareness of my product. And fortunately, my favorite thing to do is exactly what we're doing right now, is on podcasts. I think somebody told me the other day there are over 2 million podcasts on the internet. Well, that's a tremendous number of podcasts. But I am thoroughly enjoying doing this because I never know when somebody's listening to my podcast or me talking on a podcast that I'm going to connect with, and maybe they'll get an idea from something that I said that will trigger something for them that they will be able to go and run with it. And so I'm concentrating on using the podcast platform to basically get my message out. I think my mission today has changed from selling so many CDs and tapes to basically informing people about my book and my music, so that they will hopefully be curious enough about it to go listen to the music and maybe even go buy the book. Or even you can go on Amazon and listen to 2 or 3 chapters of my book, or read some of them free. They have a look inside feature. So my mission is to spread my music and my book. And one of the podcasters I talked to the other day, she says, "Dave, I think your mission is to spread happiness." And I said, well, I like that, because my music does kind of engender peace and happiness, and the more I can spread it, the better off the whole world will be. So I guess that is my mission, to spread happiness.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. I think about why I do this Data Leadership Lessons podcast, and it's because I want to share my passion with other people. And the more we do that for all of us, as we share our passions with other people, good things happen. And you don't always have to be, predictive on that. You can let things happen. You can do things because you love them and see where it goes. Though it certainly a good idea to have a plan. sometimes, and I think your story is a testament to, like, sometimes things just fall in line too when you do what you love, and that's good as well. Like, between what you got lucky or the benefits of circumstance that you had at various points, coupled with the work you did to amplify that selectively, led you to the successful career that you've been able to enjoy and be able to share with folks. And unfortunately, we are done for today. Like, we don't have much more. We don't have any more time to talk about it. But I like, we knew, like we talked about pre-show, like, you're not the traditional Data Leadership Lessons guest, but I think that folks that are listening to this understand how your story is something that we can all relate to. And I just want to thank you personally for sharing it with us. It's inspiring, and it teaches me something about myself, and I'm sure others out there are appreciating that as well.
Well, it's been my pleasure to have a conversation with you. I think you and I have a lot in common, and we could probably talk on for many, many hours, but I know your time is short, but I really appreciate your taking the time to let me be on your show and to be your guest. It's been my honor to do so.
I appreciate that. And for the folks that are listening, what's the best way for them to find you or to listen to Rachel's song or your other music, or find you on Amazon? Where's the best place to go to find that information?
Well, I would suggest that they start by going to my website, which is combsmusic.com, COMBS music.com. And when you get to my website, you'll see links to go to check out my book and my music, and there will be ways to listen to samples of my music. And you can also, if you want to listen to some of my previous podcasts where I've been on as a guest talking about these kind of things. And there's also an interview on there because the foreword to my book was written by somebody we all know his name is Jack Canfield. Jack is the guy who co-wrote the co-author of the series, the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. It's hard to say that 3 times real fast. Chicken Soup for the Soul. But Jack wrote the foreword to my book, and he's a fabulous human being. He's one of those that is giving back big time, and he was a huge help to me in writing my book and very encouraging. And his book on success principles is like getting a PhD in business. If you haven't read his book, you need to go get that as well. But go to my website and check me out. There's stories and links and everything. And also, you can write to me on email. I read all my emails, and I love to hear from people. It's dave@combsmusic.com. Just very simple. But I'd love to hear from you.
Outstanding. And thank you again for being on the show. And thank all of you out there for watching or listening today. As always, you'll find all this information and the links that Dave's talking about in the show notes. But for those that are just listening, wanted to make sure that you got that information directly from Dave as well. Go to dataleadershiplessons.com to subscribe and check out past episodes and accelerate your journey with training at dataleadershiptraining.com. Stay safe during these unusual times and go make an impact.